All right. Where should we start?
It's good to see everybody staying for Talk Back today.
Are we live? Oh,
No,
not yet. Okay.
We're not live
That's
yet.
all right.
So
It's good to see all of you in person.
let's say some stuff that's not live. The in-person audience gets a few, behind the scenes
That's
treats.
right. That's right. We can't air all of our laundry out in the public. I'm just trying to make sure. All righty. Wow, it's quiet in here.
I know, they're ready. We're live.
All righty. We're good. Hello, everybody, and all those who are watching at home. This is our final talk back of the summer. So thank you all for joining us over the past 3 months.
Yeah.
For some great conversations.
It has been good.
Yeah, and if you've missed anything, they're all on YouTube. So you can go find them and listen back at some things.
Including the ones that Bill Leonard did.
That's
you can
right.
go back and watch those.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get started. We have a lot of questions here. That means Ben must have actually preached about something today. So.
As opposed to usual.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, this first question says, is Christianity possibly a propaganda, this is in quotations, a false hope, rather than the truth itself so powerful, actually, about Jesus and his message? Is Christianity possibly a propaganda, a false hope, rather than the truth about Jesus and his message?
Mm-hmm. Good question. That's a good question. Well, I think I would say, for me, a lot of forms of Christianity that the world has seen have been indistinguishable from propaganda, and not at all what Jesus taught in the reality. And so in that case, we have seen many different versions of Christian propaganda. And a lot of that has to do back with the rooted cause of a lot of problems, which I talked to a number of you about over and over again, which is power and control. And the church, being one of the most powerful institutions in the history of the world, has often wanted to control people. And, and part of what happens when you try to control people is you destroy the gospel, because the gospel is about freedom and liberation. And there's that great phrase that I use sometimes from Ellen Davis, where she says that the whole story of the book of Job is asking the question, can you love what you can't control? Can you learn to love what you can't control? Which is actually the story of all life. No one can control a child. No one can control a partner. And if you can't love what you can't control, then you can't love anyone. And the whole point there is, of course, that love and control are opposites. Trying to control someone or something is the opposite of trying to love it. So the same is true of our relationship with spouses, partners, friends, colleagues. It's also true about our relationship with church. If you love something, you can't control it. It's out of your control. And so there has to be this sense of, a couple weeks ago, somebody said, when do we know when to let go and let God? All the time. That's all the time. Because control is not only an illusion, but it leads to damage, harm, violence, oppression. And so, I think whenever Christianity has tried to control, and you can go back and look at the debates about different doctrines. What was that about? It's about control, splitting between East and West, Protestant, Catholic. A lot of it really is about power and control, and which is not the message of Jesus. There's a really important passage where Jesus definitively deals with power, where John and James's mom tries to get them to grasp for seats in the kingdom. This is also another reminder that the kingdom was not some kind of otherworldly place that Jesus was building, because why would they care what seats they sat in if they were going to be dead? But they thought it was earthly power, so they go grasping for it, and Jesus says, that's not what we do. We don't, Gentiles, the nations of the earth, lord it over people, but our community, we are not about lording power over other people. And that's sort of the definitive statement about power in the Gospels. It happens in actually shows up in all the synoptic Gospels, the same story. And no surprise that it was their mother who was pushing them to try to grasp for power there. But anyway, that's another story for another day.
Okay, so this question says, I grew up hearing there are two things you don't talk about in polite company: politics and religion.
Yep.
What I want to do is to grab a person by the shoulders, shaking them and screaming, "What in the hell are you thinking?" Do you have any suggestions about how I might be in conversation with those family members and friends?
Oof, my. Well, I think if we step back, there was a part in the sermon when I talked about our natural human propensity to try to make sense of the unexplainable, which, by the way, is part of what religion does. So propaganda and religion function in similar ways, which is not surprising that they sometimes are indistinguishable from each other. If we can back up and just admit human beings, doesn't matter where they live, how educated they are, we are all prone to being manipulated by propaganda, by untruth, by mistruth, false truth, whatever you want to call it. If we weren't, the world would not have had the kind of history that it's had in the 20th and 21st century so far. And so first, I think one of the problems that we have is we have too high a view of human nature. We often imagine that we are not capable of being fooled. But there comes a point where you humbly realize that even the smartest people, even yourself, can be manipulated and misdirected and fooled by misinformation. I remember when a lot of this stuff was going around after the election, and they were saying, we were first learning that Russian bots were creating like false Facebook ads, right? And I went back and looked at the ads that some of them were, especially the ones, lining up with some of my political persuasion. I was surprised at how many of them I had read, how many of them I had clicked on, how many of them I looked at, right? Why? I didn't know. It didn't say Russian bot trying to convince you on there, It would just look like another article from a magazine that I might want to read with information. This is what I meant by we live in an unprecedented moment with propaganda, because even the Nazis didn't have Twitter. Even the Nazis didn't have Facebook, right? Just look at how hard we've had to force those tech companies to take seriously misinformation. And then the kind of, freedom of, First Amendment stuff. And, it's either about protecting the populace from untruth or it's just the Wild West. There's really no middle ground there. And I think we're living at an unprecedented moment. So if you take the unprecedented moment and a sobering view of human anthropology, then that is a good place to start with your relatives, and yourself. We could easily be manipulated. I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody. This is small, right? Because it's church, right? But I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody with advanced degrees who is sharp and smart and can usually see through anything, call me and rehearse a piece of gossip they got from somebody else. Because it was their friend who told them, right? And so that's why it's so hard with families, right? And so difficult there. So anyway, I think we just got to have a much more sobering view of the human anthropology. We are very easily manipulated. We are easily deceived. And we have to have our guard up higher, which is hard because on the one hand, we are constantly being targeted for manipulation. But on the other hand, we live in a society where trust in any leader and in any organization has been fractured so deeply that it's hard to know who to trust. So it becomes this really difficult discernment. I've been really surprised personally about how many people have found the COVID information that we put in our weekly to be an important piece of their regular reading. And the reason is that some people still trust us more than they trust Facebook, thank God. And they don't know who to trust. And they trust that with the scientists and the people that we are talking to about COVID, that we're not putting articles in the weekly that are going to lead you down an unhealthy path, right? And so, but what we're coming to a moment where even trust in religious organizations, people still trust police officers more than they do pastors in America. People, the trust in religious leaders, the trust in all leaders is waning dramatically. And I do think it has to do with this misinformation. We've been manipulated so long, we don't know who to trust anymore. We don't believe anybody. Trust is just like, it's like a pipe dream. So we constantly live in this world kind of guarded, never fully open. And I think that makes community really, really hard. If we can't lean into trusting each other, how do we live in community,
How do we have difficult conversations if you don't trust your neighbor?
Well, right, so there's this scholar, Feltman, who wrote a book it's called The Thin Book of Trust, or A Thin Book on Trust. He defines trust as handing someone your most prized possession to take care of for you. That's the definition of trust. And that's tough, right? Handing over your life, your child's life, your livelihood, something you love, over to someone else's care for them to hold and take care of. So anyway, I think that's a challenge for community.
So speaking of difficult conversations and controversy, how is controversy being addressed today within Myers Park Baptist?
Good question. Well, it's hard right now because we're not seeing a full church. So one of the things that we're constantly lamenting as a staff is we don't know who our church is anymore. So you all are here, but every week for now going on over 18 months, more people have been online than in person. For a while, there was nobody in person. But even since we've been back, we've never crested back to the point where there were more people here than online. That makes things incredibly hard. How do we know if there's a large group of people upset with anything? How would we know? We don't see them. How do we know that there's not 200 people wildly happy about every damn thing I say? You don't know. You don't know that. I mean, how would you know? We don't know who our church is. So that makes controversy challenging. Two things. It makes every controversy seem like it's bigger than it is when you don't know who your church is. So that's the first thing. When in reality, it might be one person's concern. And the other thing is, I think we have a hard time distinguishing, as I tried to deal with in my sermon, between genuine controversy, constructive criticism, and someone who just wants to burn it all down. And there is a gray area there, right? There's a gray area, but I think we unfortunately treat them all the same, no matter where they are on that spectrum. And that's not appropriate, and it's not going to work, right? It's, constructive criticism usually is about being heard and understood. And oftentimes will come out in the open. I try to kind of deal with some of this. It's out in the open. It deals with the primary person involved first and foremost. If it does not get its answer there, then it tries to bring two or three. I mean, the Bible lays this out. Jesus has a teaching on this. I know we don't believe in Jesus, but Jesus has some helpful teachings on this. Bring two or three with you next. If you're still not convinced, bring it to the whole body. At no point in that does it say, sit around with some friends over dinner and trash somebody and spread a bunch of gossip. Never does it say that. Never. So how do we know the difference? Controversy is in the light. Controversy is out in the open. Conspiracy is in the dark. That's the line. That's the line. If you can't say it out loud, if you couldn't stand right there in front of all these people and say it out loud to this group right here, even this small group, then it's conspiracy, not controversy. And that's the line. We have to have a line. Otherwise, we're taking everything as if it's the same. There's got to be a different approach. There's a reason Jesus laid all that out. There's a healthy approach and an unhealthy approach, right? This church has never been afraid of controversy. Do y'all think I'm afraid of controversy? Y'all think me is afraid of controversy? Bring it on, man. Come on. This is what we do all summer long now for 6 years. I've stood here after every sermon and fielded every question and sometimes concerns that have nothing to do with the sermon. And we've just talked about it. And that's what we are. We've done that for 30 years, 40 years. That's what this church is. So controversy, that's part of the lifeblood of being Baptist, right? Is you just don't have to agree with anybody else if you don't want to. But it makes it challenging to lead a church where no one has to agree with each other, right? And figure out how we're all going to walk on the same mission down the same road for the same goal. That is challenging. But that's what makes us who we are here. This is not about conformity. We don't want people to believe the same things. That's just going to be boring. I don't want to go to church like that. One of the best compliments that our church has ever gotten one time, I can't say names here, but a person who has a more conservative political persuasion, and their family got upset about something that took place at the church. And they said to one another, well, should we go up the street to one of the other Myers Park churches? And they said, finally they decided, no, we don't want to be spoon-fed. We don't want to be spoon-fed. We might not agree with everything that's said here or done here, but we don't want to be spoon-fed. We don't want to be placated. We don't want to just get, a weak, watered-down gospel. Give us the truth. Give us the hard stuff, and let us argue about it. Let us wrestle with it. To me, that's a great compliment to who this community is. And so, anyway, I'll leave it there.
That's great. So you said truth. Give us the truth. So this question says, what is the difference, if any, between truth and critical theory?
Critical theory. Well, one of the things I've kind of gone back and forth with some folks in the church about is that there is in the Bible itself a debate about truth that Jesus has with Pilate, right? And that could lead one to imagine that there is no such thing as truth, that it's all a matter of perspective. Are you in political power with the ability to execute people, or are you the wild Jewish prophet accused of blasphemy and treason? Where does the truth come from? Which one has the truth? Hopefully the followers of Jesus believe that Jesus did, but I'm not so sure all the time. I don't think we need to submit to complete and total relativism just because there are differing versions of the truth. There is a wide range of things we need to think about when we talk about truth. The first thing we have to talk about is just basic fact, scientific facts. We're not even talking about truth anymore. That's just like information that is credible, reliable. It's founded on sound science and scholarship. It has research behind it. This country has done extraordinary things in the world, and I'm not just thinking about vaccines here, but extraordinary things in the world through deep research, study, science, whether it be psychology, psychological research, medicines that have been created to help the population, vaccines, inventions. I could go on and on. That happened through science. That happened through research. So that's all that has to be the foundation. That's not even truth to me. That's the foundation. Anything other than that is just complete baloney. And we've got lots of people running around in America that don't believe in any of that. So if that's the foreground, though, that's the baseline. Then upon that, we have a conversation about what I call capital T truth, or what Joseph Campbell, the great narrative thinker, said is mythical truth. What is the truth that transcends science, generations, cultures, nations. There are truths that transcend those. Love, the importance of peace, community, stories like Scripture that communicate a transcendent truth that is beyond anything factual. But again, if you don't have the bottom line, you can't get to capital T truth. It's sort of like trying to exegete the Bible without any scholarship and then trying to tell the truth of the story on top of that if you haven't done your work. It's hard. That makes it very challenging. It's like we're proof texting all the way throughout the world, not just the Bible. And so we have to have that foundation. Anyway, we have to talk about all that truth. When we're talking about truth, we have to be thinking about all those things. And not just, did it happen? You know, Joe went to the store at 9 o'clock is not an important truth all the time, unless something happened at the store that we need to know about. But God loves you. That's a truth, right? That you need to hear. So we need the foundation of science, which is given by God, research, which is given by God, facts of reality. We need the basis of reality so that on top of the basis of reality, we can make real meaning with capital T, mythic truth that transcends even the facts. And so I think a lot of folks caught up in conspiracies got that all backwards. They start with Jesus, and then they try to move toward understanding reality. And that doesn't really work that way, because especially if your vision of Jesus is already screwed up, right?
Which kind of goes into this next question, a little bit taking us back to the beginning. So when we talk about truth and reality, have Christians been swayed by propaganda of religious beliefs, or is this reality? So what is reality if we have been swayed by religious propaganda?
Yeah, well, I promised I wasn't going to talk about whiteness today, but I promised myself. But if you're deluded, if you've been living in denial under the sense of a complete delusion for most of your life, you've lost touch with reality. So getting in touch with reality is very, very hard. If you still believe that people are superior than other people based on the color of their skin, then you're living in a false reality. And how do you get in touch with any reality if that's your reality? And what do you say? The majority of Americans still believe in white supremacy, and it's growing in some ways. It's actually worse now than it was before the murder of George Floyd. If you lived your whole life in that delusion, how can you understand what America is? And America is its own kind of delusion. I mean, I think about what's going on right now in Afghanistan. One of the things that really broke my heart was hearing about soldiers suffering from, remember, I was in the Army, so I have a kind of a passion for veterans suffering with moral injury. I don't know if y'all know what moral injury is, but it's a psychological term where you committed an immoral act and you have the psychological trauma from that. Well, here are folks that went to Afghanistan believing that they were doing what was necessary after 9/11 to rid the world of terrorists like Osama bin Laden, to make the world a safer place. And now, everything they did has been completely erased. They saw their friends die. They left their spouses home alone for years. They had the psychological toil and nothing to show for it. It's like going to school for a degree and paying for the degree and not getting the diploma. And it's worse. And so I think about that and I think, well, what lies got us in there in the first place? What kind of delusions took us there? And do we need to have a reckoning about war in general? I think I saw a post from one of our church members about Vietnam and Korea and now Afghanistan. When will we learn? When are we going to learn? This makes, I mean, it just, how many of these do we have to go through where billions of dollars are wasted, lives are wasted, and nothing changes? Again, back to the propaganda. It's almost always propaganda that gets us into war, right? I've been talking about this a lot, I think on podcasts and lately with some folks, is I remember I was in the Army when 9/11 happened. My father called me that same day as the towers were falling. He said, "Son, you're going to war." One of the hardest things I've ever heard my father say to me. I didn't, but it was terrifying. And then I turned on the TV to hear the president say, people asking, why did they hate us? Why are they doing this to us? Why do they hate us? And the answer kept being over and over again, they hate our freedoms. What a crock. What a crock. Tell the truth. We've been in the Middle East since Iran, messing around, destabilizing governments, trying to find oil, right? Occupying holy sites, supporting Israel blindly, over and against the entire Arab world. Why do they hate us? Because we did stuff that they didn't like. What do you mean, why do they hate us? And it's ahistorical. It's so much of this kind of, they hate our freedoms. That doesn't make any sense. Come on. But we bought it. And we were united as a country going over to Afghanistan, and now look where we are. I mean, at some point, we've got to take stock and say, okay, we got to stop buying this load. And it's been coming from both sides. Don't give me the right and left thing on this one. Both sides play the same game. We just saw Biden say some very strange things about war, connecting it with the Bible. Why? We don't need that again. We had that with Bush. Don't connect it to religious. Don't connect it to Scripture. Tell us the truth, What if they had just said, Kuwait is an important place because it has oil. Therefore, we're going to Kuwait because we want you to not have to pay $10 for a gallon of gas. Every American would have been like, we're going to Kuwait, right? Why do we need some religious motivation or justification? Just tell the truth. It's about economics, right? It's about power and economics. And anyway, I think, it's hard.
And all of this intersects with our religious culture in this country, which is Christian dominant.
Right. There's a reason why Israel is the one that we've decided to blindly support. It comes from this Christian Zionist movement that's been a part of American empire for 250 years. And it comes from an evangelical tradition. When do I get the chance to walk off that bus? No. The nation has decided that we are going to blindly support Israel until every Arab in the Middle East hates us with the fire of 1,000 suns. And we're going to sit back in denial and blindly say, why do they burn our flag? I don't understand. Why are they bombing us? We're just trying to get our people out. They're pissed. And we did something to deserve it. So, let's own it. Let's own it. But of course, when you start doing that and telling the truth, the American public, their threshold for wanting to go to war goes way down. And then if you don't have public support for a war, it's hard to get elected or reelected. So it's a game, and we got to tell the truth about that kind of stuff. And back to Christianity, if you just look at it, it's the religiosity that's propping all this up, right? I remember when President Bush said we were in a holy war, right? We were going into a holy war. Well, we lost that one. If it was a holy war, we were on the wrong side. I mean, we've got to take some stock now. This kind of rhetoric is not helping. It's not been helpful. And this is why getting the propaganda out of our Christianity is so important. We've got to extract the things that have been kind of insidiously inserted into our Christianity. This idea that American capitalism is divine. This idea that whiteness is divine. This idea that America is exceptional. All that we got to get out of our faith. Even if you want to believe that objectively over here, get it out of the Christianity, get it out of our religion. And that's going to take some work. That takes a lot of formation. We've been doing a lot of programs and education on that. But it's about kind of trying to, otherwise what happens to our faith is it becomes a false religion. It becomes an idol, an idolatrous form of a faith that we once loved. Back to that first question, right?
Ooh, yes. So we have a question here kind of about the sermon, and you talked about beware. Beware, and this person says, beware versus confront. Why beware if you are not going to do something about it?
Well, I do think the word beware has the intention of action in it in the Greek as it's used. So I think this could be a semantic question here. I don't think Jesus was just saying, watch out. Beware carries a little bit bigger meaning, a little bit more power to it. It means, not just watch out, but like keep on guard, be vigilant. He says this same word, blepete, it's the Greek for beware. It happens, beware the scribes who are devouring widows' houses. It's the same word for keep awake in the garden.
That's right, and yes.
Right, so keep awake, keep aware in the garden. Blepete, blepete, it keeps coming up over and over again. It's never just about kind of being alert. It's about like being on guard and ready at any moment to pounce. So there's a confrontational element to it. To stand against or turn away from that which Jesus is saying beware of there. So I think that it contains the active element within it. Yeah.
That's good. And then this question, I'm having trouble reading it, but it says, how do we identify, develop, and nourish brave souls in our church? I think that's what it says. How will I know when I am consumed by bad yeast?
Yeah. Two good questions. Well, again, I think, bad yeast has no standing, right? There's nothing behind it. So if you say, well, where did you get that information? Well, I heard. That's bad yeast. Where did you get that information? And if the answer is, well, I called the chair of so-and-so ministry, and I called the chair of deacons, and they said, yes, you're right, that is occurring. That's different. What's the proof? What's the standing? So if you're consumed with bad yeast, it's because you've bought in hook, line, and sinker to a whole bunch of things that have no credibility to them, and you're kind of continuing to parrot those around. And usually it's stuff that's happening in the dark. If it's not something that you can say at a congregational meeting or at a deacon's meeting, or like I said, standing right here on the floor before God and everybody, then it's probably yeast and not constructive criticism, or constructive concern about something that's occurring, which we welcome. That's happening. That's why we have the dynamic that we have, laity and staff working together, so that there's always that accountability. What was the second part? Yeah, so I think brave leaders, that's a challenge. It really is a challenge. And it's one of the challenges for it right now is we're not together. And I think we're stronger when we're together, and we're braver when we're together. We're braver when we can see each other face to face and stand next to our fellow church members and face any controversy hand in hand, arm in arm. And I think that this lack of being together makes us less brave. It makes us unsure of what we're dealing with, what we're up against. And when you don't really know what you're up against and you don't have your people with you, you can feel like you're out on an island or out on a limb alone trying to face something that may be bigger than you or overwhelming. So I think we need each other. I think we need training. We need leadership training. Leadership has gotten harder in church, not easier. I see Ryan here. Y'all should go ask Ryan about how being a deacon is. It's hard. It's really hard now. It used to be that the church was not in decline. So any leader who comes to you who was leading before 1990, they don't know what it's like anymore. They don't know what it's like. It's a different ballgame now. Church is different. Things have changed. Leadership was easier at a time when we weren't facing America like we are now. I was kind of explaining this to somebody the other day. Since I've arrived, a lot of things have come together at the same moment. When I got here in 2016, I did not expect that we would move that same year into the Trump presidency. So the entire time that I've been here was President Trump. In addition to that, we were embarking on a brand new strategic plan, right? Destined to shake up a congregation when you do a new strategic plan, even if they create it. because then things start to change. So we've been changing the church while Trump has been president. Those two things are not unrelated. They both cause stress. They've both caused concern. They both cause, and then you add to that a global pandemic. Why do I say that? We could be a lot worse off. And if you call your friends who go to other churches, you'll hear it. They are a lot worse off. Bill Leonard's pastor was fired a couple weeks ago up in Winston-Salem. I have a number of my friends whose churches are in complete anarchy, financial chaos, not sure they're going to be able to stay open. The average now is, and this was worse earlier in the pandemic, it's kind of tapered off now, but 66 ministers leave ministry a day in America now. 66 per day leave the ministry. What's happening with folks deciding to leave their jobs at the restaurants or wherever is the same thing that's happening to clergy, sitting around at home with time on their hands thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I putting up with this? You know? We should be thanking every minister on our staff every day. Honestly. I'm not saying that for me. Honestly. I mean, this is a chaotic and crazy time. And because of the generosity of our members, we were able to keep everybody whole through the pandemic, and that has brought us a lot of goodwill with our staff. And they've done incredible things in that time. But we have to admit, this has been crazy. We had a new pastor, a Trump presidency, a new strategic plan, and a pandemic. I should be on the floor. I usually am when I'm not in here with y'all, you know? I mean, literally, it's crazy. And that's why, and so all the way back around to the sermon, that's why this is not the time. This is not the time for conspiracies. This is not the time. We are not as strong. We're not as strong as we think we are. And so we really just, we can't deal with that now. We don't have time for that. Bill Leonard said this in one of his articles, and I know y'all are reading them because I get the statistics each week of what you're reading, and it certainly ain't the sermon. So you're reading Bill Leonard's article every week, and I love that. That's why we're doing it. And one of the things Bill said is, this is not the time for fighting. This is the time for unity, for your church to come together and find what you have in common about your love for this place and this community. And that's what I wanted to cast in this sermon. The bravery also comes, again, from your love of what this community and this church means, not just to you, but to everybody else. Into this city. I think about some of the people that we've been helping out through the pandemic that we can't even tell you about. We can't even tell you about all the people we're helping out. We're taking people sleeping in cars to living in their own apartments through the Sunshine Fund and gifts from our members that are given to the Sunshine Fund. Look at what we're doing for Haiti this past week. And that's just in addition. Those are new things on top of what we were already doing. This church means so much. We have people coming here right now. I don't want to kind of point them out because they're not here in Talkback, but we got people coming to us who are on staff at Elevation and who are tenured professors at Davidson. Think about that for a minute. I want you to spend some time this afternoon thinking about that. On staff at Elevation, tenured professor at Davidson, coming to our church and joining. Think about that. That's what we are. That's who we can be. And I think the thing I'm most concerned about, right, is that some conspiracy will spoil the whole loaf for everybody. We just can't do that. Right now, too much good things are happening. We've had, 25 or something people join the church already this year, again, in a pandemic. And the challenges are going to keep coming in years ahead, right? As we come out of the pandemic or as things change, we're going to need each other. So I just want to be clear. The staff, we're committed to being here for you and being here with you and seeing the church through this transition, but we need y'all in it with us, and we need the bravery of our members in it with us as well. So I hope you all will stick it out with us, be strong, stand up, stand tall, and let's keep doing what we're doing. We really are making a difference in the world, really.
That's an excellent ending point, Ben, for the final talk back of the summer.
Yeah. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all for joining us. Thank you for people watching online. Feel free to, keep talking back to us in our emails or to our faces, whatever you need, okay? Take care.